we want to welcome all of His Glory Nation from east to west to north to south as we have a special guest today. All the way from across the pond, we are going to bring in Gregory Hallett. He is the king, King John III. So we're going to have him explain to you his background, also explain to you the legal documentation that he has. Before we went live, we were talking, and it's a small world. We have several mutual friends, and he's in the middle of doing a documentary as we speak. So live from across the pond, welcome, Greg. Can you explain to the audience where your background is? Because before we came on, there were some things I didn't know about you in Moscow, the Cold War, being in New Zealand, and then we can go into the legal part of the crown, and maybe talk a little bit about the reset.
Okay, we can do that. Yeah, so I was in the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War, doing my best to work on the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then I was sent to Moscow 4 weeks after the Berlin Wall came down, and I was taken to the house, which is the ideal house in Moscow. You've probably been there. It's about 7 stairs up, and it's all red and green inside, and a beautiful KGB agent takes you in there with a couple of others, and everything's absolutely tidy, and they tell you that it's 1 ruble a month for rental and 1 ruble a month for electricity and gas. You know, I think it was 10 rubles, which is equivalent to, on the flat market, $1 for rent and $1 for gas and electricity. So I went there, and then I noticed that the Russians were deconstructed to think like the state. So I went back to Budapest and developed a method for reconstructing the subconscious. And then I mentioned it on radio in 2002 at the end of March. And then the president of the Scientist Club in St. Petersburg flew up to New Zealand and stayed with me and briefed me on world affairs for a month. And he had a couple of black boxes for reconstructing the subconscious. So he reconstructed my subconscious into anything of my choosing. And at the time, I chose interim prime minister and 2-term governor general. So that was kind of good. And then the next day, because it works in the subconscious, so what happens is your whole world's changed immediately. And the next day I met the Queen Mother's bodyguard and the former 2IC of the intelligence, and I was briefed in about 4,000 meetings, and I got, I've written 15 books, and I got 5 books out of them, and I could have got 10. And I was still a fast note taker from university days. I spent 6 years at university, so they could speak and I could write, and they didn't have to slow down too much. And then I'd have Spy Master, and I'd take the intelligence information to the Spy Master, and he would confirm or deny it and add stories. So I had the Security Intelligence Service and Internal Affairs and the Spy Master and the Queen Mother's bodyguard all adding to these intelligence stories. And I ended up writing up the trawler wars, right?
Wow.
Which is a big risk because I was the first person to write up the trawler wars. You know, that was about the US submarines leading the Russian submarines around, and the US trawler and the Russian trawler. So it was, I think it was the US submarine followed by a Russian trawler, followed by a Russian submarine, followed by a US trawler, and they're doing snakes around New Zealand, and they were laying locator beacons for the Polaris missiles because satellites weren't working in the 80s. And Putin was there. Putin was in New Zealand from 1980 to 82. So New Zealand was actually the hotbed of the Cold War, and there's very few people who knew it, you know. And I was given all the locations of where everyone was hiding, so they'd have boarding houses with alcoholics and bums, if you like, you know, bums, and the front door and in the hallway. So once you got past the bums, you were actually in an intelligence headquarters. So I wrote all of this up, and I had a great time writing it. And then, kind of for a laugh, I didn't really know at the time, but I had a photo of myself and my child, who was then about 4, in front of a beach in the middle of nowhere, and a caption I put at the bottom was, a couple of royals in the South Pacific. And then that was 2007, and I was never allowed to work anywhere in the world again. And I don't think that was because I wrote up the trawler wars. It was because I just mentioned a couple of royals in the South Pacific, and they probably, he knows who he is, So I've just been finding out, right? And I found out that the current incumbent British royal family are fake, and they've been fake for a couple hundred years, and it's called Flatline Royal. They're actually illegitimate Rothschilds, so they're bastards, and royal bastards are called batards. Yeah. So, so over to you and Oliver. Have a glass of water.
Yeah, while you're taking a glass of water, I'm just going to tell our audience, for those who've been following His Glory and our intel that we've been going all the way back to 2009, it was our intel sources in 2009 were telling us that the royals were illegitimate. The CIA_A was well aware of that. They were targeting the House of David, literally. So that nobody could make a claim. So what he's talking about is something that intel sources, at least I knew all the way back to 2009.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned the House of David, because what the Bible predicts is that entry into the House of David is not by blood, it's by secondary means. It actually says via the bowels, right? Which means via secondary means, which also includes initiation. So I was given the second highest sword on the planet, the sword of the Duke of Sachsen, Coburg and Gotha on Leap Day 2012. That's 29th February at 10 p.m. And I was instructed to sleep with the sword and hold it up to the castle in the morning, which I did. So I slept with the sword, rolled over. It's such a nice sword, slept with it all night. Just didn't want to leave it out of my hand. And then I went out to the balcony, which is about 1,000 square feet, and held it up to Moorish Castle, right? And Moros is the root word of mulberry, yeah? Mm-hmm. And David hid under the mulberry tree twice, right? So that was my initiation into the House of David.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, it's never been done before, never been done by anyone else.
Wow. So when was it that you realized that you were in the bloodline?
In 2012, 2013, and 2014, I was given a letter which Queen Victoria wrote, and it said, assemble and claim it. I returned the letter. I was given it in 2012. I returned it in 2013. And they gave it straight back to me. They inspected it and gave it straight back to me. And then I returned the letter again in 2014. And they inspected the letter and then handed it straight back to me. So I was given the letter 3 times. It's the most valuable legal document in the British Empire.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's got Queen Victoria's blood thumbprint on it. It's got a gold monogram. It's got a 1850 J. Waterman Turkish Mills watermarks on it, and an envelope. And it was, to validate it, it was passed via King Dom Ferdinand II of Portugal, who had all of Walter Raleigh's original manuscripts. He was a big fan of Sir Walter Raleigh. And then I found out that Sir Walter Raleigh was my great times 10 grandfather. So all of these coincidences, it's just fantastic. Yeah, it's just great. As
the rabbis say, coincidence is not a kosher word. God doesn't work in coincidence. So in 2012, in 2007, when you were writing these books, you had no idea.
Actually, God works in coincidences. Coincidences. Yeah. I was getting interviewed by an emeritus professor, and I was saying coincidence a lot, and he said, "Oh, you mean coincidence?" Two realities running parallel, confirming each other.
Yeah, amen. Yep, that is so true.
Yeah.
So 2012, you got the documents. So can you walk us through the documents and how this legal right goes to you, and then tell us what the status is with the royals today?
Oh, they're crumbling. Yeah. So I'd written a book in 2007 called How to Take Over the World, a Right Royal Con. And I exposed that Prince Albert, who married Queen Victoria, was illegitimate, and he was the son of a stable boy called Alex Hanstein. And he wasn't actually Prince Albert of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha. He was just Albert of Saxony. So he was a petard. He was illegitimate. But Queen Victoria was actually married prior to her first cousin, who was the second in line to the throne, called Blind Prince George of Cumberland. And Prince Albert, the illegitimate son of the stable boy, just happened to look exactly like Queen Victoria's first husband. So that's why they chose Prince Albert to marry Queen Victoria, which was actually her second marriage. And out of her first marriage, Queen Victoria produced Prince Marcos Manuel, and he was sent to Portugal to grow up. And Prince Marcos Manuel is actually the origin of the story Peter Pan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when Peter Pan's flying past Big Ben, and Big Ben means sun. So the big sun, S-O-N, yeah, sun. He says, just go out past Big Ben to the mouth of the river, and it's the second on the right, which is Portugal. Yeah? So identifying where he lived. And he was actually made King John II of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland in 1869, 6th of October, 1869. Yeah, so it's fantastic, you know. And he was given the sword of the Duke of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha, and then I was given the sword of the Duke of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha, and I was actually promoting. I was the royal biographer for Queen Victoria's great-great-great-great-grandson, who is Prince Marcos Manuel's great-great-great-grandson, 3 times. And I awarded him, a whole volume 3, I awarded him the Duchy of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha, which is 0.2% of Germany and has 13 castles, including the old Diet, which is Parliament. And he gave me the letter saying assemble and claimant. Then we found out what was written on the letter, and it was written in familiar French, but it says assemble and claimant. And he accepted that, and he still handed me the letter. And he said, if you go to England and you're the King of England, you won't have to do anything. So I came to England in 2015, 1st of March, and the whole British royal family's been crumbling.
Yeah.
Just absolutely crumbling. No? So that's good. So I was in the Eastern Bloc during the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I was in Holland, the Netherlands, when Queen Beatrix abdicated, and I was in the Algarve in Portugal, about an hour's drive from Spain, when King Juan Carlos of Spain abdicated, and now I'm in England, and the British royal family abdicating, you know. And this wouldn't be the case if they were rightful, but they're not rightful. Right. So somehow I've got this presence that makes monarchies crumble.
and you,
when they're not true, you know, when they're not true.
And you and I both found out, I think it was Friday, they got some really bad news on the financial side as well.
You broke up.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. You broke up? I said on Friday, you and I both know that the Royals got some bad financial news as well.
That did happen on Friday.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I got the news Thursday or Friday, and the news is that all the funding for the British royal family has been withdrawn, and they've been taken into bankruptcy, and all the funding for the Rothschilds have been bankrupted. Is that your understanding?
Yes. Yep.
And they took the insignia off the gates of Buckingham Palace because I think they want my insignia on that. I think they want this on there instead.
Mm-hmm. The 3 7s.
Yeah, the 3 7s. I'm pleased you said. It's an intelligence test, if you can see the 3 7s. Yep. And 3 7s means the end times, as in the end times to the new age. And it also means the Shin, which is the forbidden secret. And I've been running the Shin. And one of the forbidden secrets is that the British royal family are flatline royal. They're fakes. You know, and they were illegitimate Rothschilds, and they only had permission to rule for 200 years from 1812 or 1819. So that time's up. So they're just crumbling. And the two people they chose to crumble first was Prince Andrew. He's closest in age to me. He's born in 1960. I'm born in 1961. And Prince Harry. And Prince Harry's got the same birthday as me.
Wow.
So that's why they're using that. They're using it as markers. Yeah.
So you brought this paperwork to it's gotten to the attention of the Pope, the royals, Donald Trump, Putin.
Yeah.
And you've got confirmation that they've all seen that, correct?
Yeah, they've acted on it. It's called estoppel in action when they act on the documents, and they've been acting on the documents. So I sent it to Trump, and then Trump's using his contacts to question the Queen. Is this true? Do you want her to deny anything? And she can't, and she hasn't. So she's basically withdrawn under the cover of coronavirus, and coronavirus is Latin for we crown him. Yeah. And they're standing outside on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. clapping for the NHS, and NHS stands for New Hallett Sovereign.
Wow.
Yes, beautiful.
You can't make this stuff up.
You can't make it up. And they also closed down the whole world for Lent.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so St. Paul's was empty, or St. Peter's rather was empty.
Well, some will say it's been empty for a long time. So the Pope is aware of this as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So they've been aware of me since birth, because the Hebrews, in the original Hebrew language, they made some predictions leading up to 200 AD, and then they were satisfied with the predictions, so they turned the entire Hebrew language off for 1,700 years. Mm-hmm. And 17 is the number Q, right?
Right.
So I looked up the predictions, and it's in the Midrash Song of Songs 2. Midrash 2 Song of Songs, I think it is. And it's got various names. And it gives codifying that the Mashiach, which is the king of Israel, so it's called HaMashiach or the Mashiach, and he's automatically the king of Israel, and he's the predicted one. And it says the 7 years leading up to his birth, what will happen, and that was the 7 years leading up to 1961. And the last 2 years, or begins actually with drought, and America had droughts from 1950 to 57. Mm-hmm. Fantastic droughts, you know, just giant tumbleweeds.
Right. And
a meter deep or 3 feet deep in just sand and dust. And then the last ones, and then there's hunger, which was China, and then there's threat of war, which was leading up to the Cold War, and then a dread of war, and then threat of war, which was the Berlin Wall going up on the 13th of August 1961, which was exactly 33 days before I was born. Yeah? So that was kind of interesting. So that sort of encouraged me. Well, you know, I didn't know it at the time, but that was kind of why I got involved in dropping the Berlin Wall. You know, I had some pretty strong effects on that. And then and kind of no one knew what I was doing, but they kind of did as well. You kind of, you know, some of your intelligence services took me on a tour to Patmos, which was interesting. So, and then it says, okay, he's going to be born in the new year, and the new year is the changeover year. So the Jews have 4 new years, and the new year that actually changes over the year is called Rosh Hashanah. Mm-hmm. And I was born in Rosh Hashanah 1961, and then it gets really specific to what day, whether it's Rosh Hashanah Ebet, which is the eve, or Rosh Hashanah Day, or the day after. And it goes on for 3 days, but in the old system, it actually went off for 10 days. And I was born at exactly the right time to the hour. So, you know, people who were born at that time, they probably went, okay, has this person got the bloodline to be Hamashiach, which is automatically king of Israel, right? And when the Hamashiach is found and acknowledged, they go back to the old ways with more oomph. And Israel's not supposed to be run by government. It's supposed to be run from the temple, right? So I put in my papers, I'm Hamashiach, and here's the proof. Please contest it. Sent it to the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of the United States and the Archbishop of Canterbury and Putin and all the royal family and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. None of them have contested it, and Israel hasn't been able to form a government in the last 17 to 18 months. Right? And that's their acknowledgement. That's called estoppel in action. That means they're acting on it, and once that they've acted on it, they can't deny it. And they've also confirmed my paperwork by passive acquiescence and cognitive avoidance. So the only thing short of it is a signature, and that comes with the, I did a triple paperwork, which is a statement of claim, affirmation, and then a more of a summary confirmation, and then affirmation, confirmation, certification. And I have witnesses to all of this, and they've all got the copies of the work, and they're all 3D paperwork. You know, we use cream, linen, watermarked SRA4 paper. SRA4 paper. So it's not limited to military jurisdiction. Okay. It goes wider. And then we use wax seals, ink stamps. We used purple penny stamps with a thumbprint over it, with a red signature drawn across it at 45 degrees. So as soon as you put the purple penny stamp on it, the document has value, right? So then you can say, these valuable documents. Right. Yeah. And then when we put the blood thumbprint on it, and signed across it in red ink at 45 degrees, that's drawing the sword. Yeah. And we also had an embosser, which is all of this graphic here. It was all done in this graphic, but then it said Prince Regent Duke Governor down the bottom. Right. The British royal family reacted by taking down one of their insignias off the gates of Buckingham Palace and 10 Downing Street, which is the Parliament in the United Kingdom. So who took that down? They took it down. British royal family took their own insignia down off the gates, and they came up with a cockamamie story that a lorry had caught it. But they're actually taking down the unicorn, and the unicorn is chained and with a third eye on it, connection to God, yep. Right. But it's chained, and to the powers that be, that actually means taxpayer. Wow. Right? So by pulling down the chained unicorn, and chaining the third eye, it looks like personal income tax is being removed. I've been to Buckingham Palace, but I've never been in. So once you become king, you're going to have to invite me in, okay? Hey, wear shorts and flip-flops. That's the way I roll. Fascinating. Yeah. So it all appears to be happening, and there's just such a change in the air. It really feels like we've finally rolled over from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius and into a whole new way of thinking and being. And there's a whole new value system. I've just been getting love bombed. Yeah. I've been taking screen captures of people's messages and posting them in folders on Facebook, and I'm getting 160 a day. Wow. It's fantastic. Just to let bigly, that's correct. Just to let our audience know, when Greg was talking about putting the blood print on an official document, the U.S. audience is probably not aware of that, but the official documents, all the trusts that I see that are coming forward from all over the world, and the resets all have a blood print on them to make them official. So, yeah. Now, have you had anybody come forward and say they do not believe that these documents are correct? No. And I've had I was talking to a woman last night at the dinner, and she's an historian, and she's what you would call a warrior that doesn't give anything over for free, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
She's actually part of the British aristocracy line that actually got rid of King Charles I. And so she, doubly wants to give me a hard time. She said, look, I went through all these documents. I went through the whole history of it, and it was I couldn't fault it. Plus, it answers a whole lot of niggling questions. So I was a bit chuffed about that. I've been expecting some fantastic historian to come by and pull it apart, or some fantastic lawyer or judge or MP to come by and pull it apart, or some royal to pull it apart, and no one has, because it's just such a good read.
Yeah, you make a very good point, because we have three really good sources that have vetted your paperwork. I think you know two of them,
Okay.
and they both came back and said it's legit. And if nobody coming forward, it just blows my mind.
Yeah. I tell you what, I've been getting a few calls, and people saying, this foreign royal family is acknowledging you, and you're going to get a letter soon, and a whole lot of really big news. And I've got all the film crew standing around. We're all hearing this message at the same time. They're all looking at me, and I'm just going, yeah. It's just like normal for me.
Yeah.
It's not my new normal. It's just I've been operating on this level for such a long time.
Yeah.
Someone comes up to me and gives me a huge intelligence drop, and it's just like I just carry on drinking my tea.
Right. I hear that.
so if someone does that, just you expect it to be a non-reaction, because it's just become normal, really.
So
I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really appreciative of it. I'm really enjoying it. But it's just, I'm not jumping up and down. I have no ego about this at all. And the whole crew will tell you this guy's got no ego.
Yeah, I can confirm that all three of the sources that I have that know you have said the exact same thing, and they don't all know each other. Each one of them came and said that you're a very humble man.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
good.
Very humble.
Great, yeah. Well,
so what's the next step for you to get into Buckingham Palace?
I wanted to give it a heavy horse from the horse guards and trot it through the gardens and back it up to the front doors of Buck House, and then give it a big kick, and then ride the horse into the hallway and up the stairs.
with flip-flops on, right?
I'll probably get riding boots for that.
Oh, okay.
Maybe some gridiron shoulder pads if it doesn't work out too well.
Yeah, that's true.
What's happening is basically the doors are just being opened, and there's no one running the United Kingdom at the moment. There's no direction at all. And people are absolutely directionless, and they realise that the entire British royal family are fake, and the entire government is fake, and the government takes its directions from the British royal family. And because they now know the Queen's fake, she can't actually do anything, right? And the proof of the pudding that the Queen's fake is that all of her birthday and Christmas messages are ambiguous. Everything she says is ambiguous because she knows that the politicians do exactly the opposite of what she says, and have done for 67 years.
Yeah.
Because they know that she's illegitimate.
Right.
The entity known as Queen Elizabeth II is actually Winston Churchill's daughter.
Really?
She's not George VI's daughter. And I know that because I was introduced to George VI's son in New Zealand in 1967. And the person who introduced me was George VI and Queen Elizabeth II's sergeant surgeon or doctor.
Wow.
Right? And he used to walk down our street in the middle of the countryside, and I used to meet him at the letterbox, and he'd have a chat. And then we'd go to his house, and then he'd send me down to see King George VI's son. So I've been getting introduced to royalty since I was 5.5. you know. So it's just the way it happened, you know. But I grew up in really, really basic, humble circumstances. Like when I was growing up, I think I had one, maybe two comics the entire childhood.
Wow.
You know? And I spent till the age of 14 just in secondhand clothes all the time. I think I bought my first shirt when I was 24. You know?
Yeah, that's humility. Yeah. So I was told by several of my sources that once the Queen was told, she acted very relieved.
Yeah, she's been expecting it. That's actually very good to hear. I'm expecting the throne and crown and sword, I'm expecting the crown and sword and orb and scepter to be sitting on the throne chair and all the doors open. Really?
I know.
No, it's a bloodless coup. It's a bloodless coup, right? Yeah. And Queen Elizabeth II was actually given to me on the 10th of October 2011. And if when Queen Elizabeth II abdicates, you are in charge of her. So I have to keep them in reasonable stead, you know, comfortable, not being attacked. So basically I'm in charge of their protection now that they've abdicated. They've done this soft abdication now and we're just waiting to formalise it. That's what's happened.
So you haven't had any formal contact with Putin or Trump or the Pope? It's just...
the Trump's been mentioning me in code.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. And that's fine because, you know, he's got to be wary because, you know, basically, you know, someone with the status of the US president, he's got to test me and test the information before he can overtly mention me.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one thing the audience follows us. We have a daily Take 5 program. And for the last 2 to 3 years, ever since Donald Trump has been the president, we've been explaining to our audience that he speaks in codes. Yes. Everything he says is planned. Everything is coded.
Yeah. Well, you know, that famous conference he gave, and it was only about 3 weeks ago, and it was in a large white room, and it was a Republican meeting, but he invited the largely Democrat media to come in and film it. It might have been Make America Great Again, I'm not sure. And he's talking to a guy and saying, Greg, great documents. And then the guy in front of the camera stands up, so it's heads in front of the camera, right? So it's Greg, great documents, heads up, yeah? And then when the guy disappears, he goes, did you see that? That was so incisive. You know, and that's the way he does it. Fantastic. I love it. So I'm getting that all through Hollywood as well. Like Hollywood movies have been naming me for years, even before I was born. Roman Holiday, The Mummy, Baby Driver, Logan, most of the X-Men movies, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Monty Python, The Life of Brian. Fantastic. It's great, you know. It's great. Yeah, they're actually physically, directly naming me. There they go. Absolutely. And in all of these organizations, there's good and bad. And you get some good people in a Hollywood movie, and they will slip in the good codes. Yeah. And the other thing about Hollywood is movies have to be action movies, right? Because, you know, people want to see action because they just don't have it in their life. So movies are action movies, and in action movies, they have to overcome evil. Yeah, and really? So sometimes what appears to be an evil character is dropping names of a good person. And you can't sort of say, oh, that's evil. You got to go, well, they're actually using this as a vehicle to drop the name. Yeah. The sermon. No idea, go to the sermon. Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, when the Bible was originally written, there were no churches, right? It was just congregation. It was a congregation of people meeting in a field, congregation of people meeting under an oak tree, congregation of people standing around a pond, whatever it was congregation, right? And then the new congregation is movie theatres. Movie theatres is where people congregated, right? Not so much now, but yeah. So what they did is they used movies as the vehicle to give the congregation message, you know. And they tried doing things like, you know, having surf movies in churches and locking the doors, but it didn't work. True, and the internet's a big part of that. But you know, I was saying the other thing. Up until 600 AD, baptism was actually bathing the feet, right? So it was about 13 and 1/7 inches high, and I get that out of John. I can't remember which John it was in the Bible, that because there's like 3 or 4 of them, you know. And so it was bathing the feet, and especially bathing the feet at dawn watching the sun and at dusk watching the sun. So ideally, baptism was a regular thing where you just stood ankle deep or halfway up your first part of your leg in a lake, a river, or by the sea, watching the sunrise, watching the sunset. And in the East, they call that solar yoga, right? But yeah, so the original baptism was bathing the feet. Yeah. Well, I was invited to be a signatory on Gesera. So that's pretty big, and that would be good because they realise that the incumbent royal family are fake and they're doing away with the old ways, which is basically rape and pillage people and civilization and countries and nations and resources. And we're not about that anymore. You know, the whole Aquarius thing is, do you have enough? Can we help? You know, and there's already a lot of people, all they want to do is help. All they do is help. They were fortunate either by inheritance or with their business projects, and they just help people. And it looks like that it's going to be closer to heaven on earth, where your accommodation and your gas and electricity and internet and phone and food are going to be covered. So you won't have that sort of, I'm going to be homeless thing. And so people can then learn what they want to learn, what they need to learn, and do what they want to do, which is going to create a really happy society, which heaven on earth, happy society, you know. So I think that's really happening. And also the thing is about energy, you know. It's about people's energy being in harmony, and because no one wants to be around a disharmonious person, least of all themselves. So we're going to get a whole lot less troubled people, which means we'll get a whole lot less mental illness. Yeah, and possibly even before, you know, possibly. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're doing the documentary now, so when we ratify the documents, hopefully we'll get a better quality of people like, let's say, British Admiralty, US Admiralty, judges, lawyers, well-known people. So it's got more oomph, and a lot of them. So we've just been practicing our Last Suppers, which we now call First Suppers. And we had one last night, which is about 18 people on this table. It's about 18 feet long by about 5 feet wide, and it's huge double-space converted barn. It's a fantastic building. So we're practicing feasting. Well, people ask me that a lot, and I don't want to tell them because then they will do it, and they'll do it in a half-assed way and then back out. And I don't want to ride this storm, which is really Zeus's thunder. You know, it's going, just changing everything. And I know exactly what I'm going to do, but I don't want them to go and say, oh, we did that, and then don't do it, and then we're all back to, oh, we need another consciousness revolution, you know? So and don't, you know, and, you know, you've got to look at what they've achieved, what those people have achieved in you know, so many hundreds of years, and not a lot. They've killed a lot of people. And they haven't really done a lot at all. Yeah, when Queen Victoria wrote the letter awarding kingship, she cut out a she cut out a hair out of the envelope, out of the letter. So if you put a white piece of paper underneath it, you actually it's a white rabbit or white hair. But I think the white rabbit is actually a hair. You know, it was just called the white rabbit because it came up, and it was easy to say in movies like in Matrix. You know, Nero, and follow the white rabbit, and it's a tattoo on the woman's shoulder. Yeah, and there's just white rabbits all through craft shops and interior decorating shops and painting. I'd say that right now, the white rabbit or the hare is possibly the most popular ornament in the United Kingdom in the last 15 years. Oh, yeah. Queen Victoria cut it out for her firstborn son, Prince Marcus Manuel, and the letter of signing kingship. And he had a spiritual title as well, and then the spiritual title went to me, as did the document. My film director's saying it's going like this. Yeah, I think we're going to film.
No, it's the Queen Victoria.
I'm into that. Oh, can I carry on a bit more?
Yeah, okay? No, we've got time.
Okay. Yeah, we can have a few more minutes, yeah. The cameraman's leaving at 8 in the morning, so we've got the next 2 hours, really. Yeah, there's a lot of editing to do. He's working on it now. And we've got the drone guys here. So everyone has come in from, well, a lot of places, actually, to make this documentary. And it's just fallen into place just fantastically, really. It's great. Maybe 2 weeks. Yeah. Well, everything's happening so fast. So, you know, they arrived a week earlier because it's happening now, you know. Yeah. So it's great, and it's great to be part of it. I'm looking forward to it. Someone suggested I have fireside chats with the king, and I just expose a bit of history for what it really was. Do that once a week. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it pretty much all happened at the Battle of Waterloo. That was the big fraud that gave the Rothschilds financial control over the British royal family. And then the Rothschilds offered to fund the near bankrupt British royal family in exchange for breeding rights. So the Rothschilds have been breeding the British royal family since 1818, 1819. And the founder of the Rothschilds, Mayer Amschel Rothschild, he had a dream in about 1773 that the Rothschilds would sire the British royal family for 200 years from his death, which was 1812 to 2012. And I've been working on this intensely since 2010, but I've really been working on this since 1980.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what kind of threats have been coming against you?
Threats?
Yeah, threats. Physical threats, spiritual threats, all kinds of things.
I've had 18 murder attempts.
18.
And and I was talking to a guy downstairs earlier today, and I said, "Oh yeah," and then blah blah blah, and it almost killed me. And I realised it was another murder attempt that I hadn't actually counted. So I think Trump's at 18 now as well.
He's at a lot.
Yeah, and I see the way I see it is like the daughter of a 2-star US general awarded me the status Cronos in 1988, and then that was the 4th of September, and then either that evening or the next evening, 4th or 5th of September, I was standing on the steps of the Parthenon, and Donald Trump was on the other side of the steps, a few steps up, and he had 2 bodyguards next to him in European American type suits, and he came over and he was telling me, he was standing 2.5 steps above me. He's a bit taller than me, and he's talking to my chest. He's imbuing me with information, if you know what I mean. When you're like this, and he talks to your chest, and he's telling me everything he's going to do, and I'm just sort of going, and it's exactly what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to change this and this, and it's just wonderful. So I'd say that he was also awarded Cronos,
Right. Yeah.
And Cronos is a I don't know if you know what the US intelligence code for Cronos is.
No, what is it?
It's the right to rule the world.
Okay. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. As far as your threats, it's funny that everybody knew that. Well, in intelligence, they knew that the royals were fake bloodline. I knew back to 2009. I remember the first time that I was told that I was from the tribe of Judah, and I said this to one of my intel sources in Israel, and they said, "We know. We wouldn't be talking to you if you weren't." So the intel sources know who we are way before we know who we are.
Yeah, and they also know who you are and what you'll be doing even before you do. Yeah. Maybe 10, 20, 30 years before. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's Operation Looking Fast, and maybe it's, I don't know, but, they just seem to pop in the right intelligence at the right time to keep you going.
Yeah.
It's great. Fantastic.
It's fantastic.
It's kind of what intelligence should be, as opposed to counterintelligence. And we've been living in a counterintelligence world. So soon we'll be living in an intelligence world. At the moment, the counterintelligence is so prolific that we're living in a non-reality. What we're doing here is changing that into a reality. And so the actual intelligence will manifest and be made public. Yeah.
Yeah. Science is just catching up with that. My mentor in the Bible and also Intel was Chuck Missler. And he used to famously say that we are in a hologram and the real reality is outside of us.
Well, we're changing that the reality is going to be integrated. And the counterintelligence hologram is just becoming a burst bubble. It's going, it's gone. And we've got this whole new reality that's come forth, which is our new age, and it's the age of Aquarius. And I was chosen to represent the end times new age back in 2014. And people will say, but it's happening now. I kind of feel, but if you design the car, if you design the vehicle, other people get to drive that vehicle 6 years later, so there's the 2014, 2020 connection, so it's just all happening. It's just all unfolding wonderfully.
So what do the people of the United Kingdom, how do they feel about what's going to happen with you? Are they going to be upset that the royals?
Judging by the dinner, we're at a mansion over there, over the field, about straight line, maybe only 400 meters, but and my party chairman, he rang a friend and said, we're in the same place, right? So I ended up walking through the field at sunset to get through here, and walking through these, walking through a mini Stonehenge out the back and some pyramids made out of hedges. And just as the sun was setting, right, and we didn't know where we were going. We had to find a path through bush and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just as the sun was setting behind us, and we're walking through these pyramids to this new supper, not a last supper, a new supper with this huge table, about 18 people. And, you know, they're all new. I've never met them before. And they're all grilling me and stuff, and they're accepting of it. You know, one of them's an historian, and she really grilled me. And she'd read all my papers and really grilled me, gave me a hard time, you know, wanted to give me a hard time, said she was a warrioress with a sword out to cut me down. And she said it was all true, and all stood up and filled in some missing gaps in history. So, and she said, God, you look exactly like Walter Raleigh. You know, it's my ancestor. So, you know, that's all good. The proof's in the pudding.
That's right. That's right.
And, you know, since I've been announcing the papers, you know, my legal papers, which started in the beginning of November, and I reread about a month ago the first 20 pages, which is the overall statement of claim. And it's like intelligence has used that, and even Q have used that as a basis for the revolution that we're in now. Mm-hmm. You know? I can just see it.
Yeah.
So
now,
I think loving it.
Your documents are like 4 feet thick, correct?
Yeah. Well, if you consider all of my documents, because they hassled me, so I was actually in court for 18 years in New Zealand. It actually goes from floor to ceiling twice, right? But my recent documents are about that thick, and my 2015 documents are about that thick.
Okay, yeah, I knew it was thick. I knew it was a lot.
Yeah, so basically they don't want to. I took my documents to the High Court Queen's Bench, and they just didn't want to see it. So they made some really terrible decisions. I even had a district court circuit judge, which is the lowest form of judge, called Martin Parry, and he signed off as though he was a High Court Queen's Bench judge, which is totally illegal, right? So I recused him, which means get rid of him because he's a nullity and he's false. And then the High Court Queen's Bench judge, Daniel John Pierce Higgins QC, he interpreted my recusing the first judge as an appeal to appeal, which means that I'd have to pay £250,000 to have my case heard, as opposed to the £10,000 that I initially paid.
Wow. It's
just a fraud. And then I found out that drug traffickers and human traffickers in Florida and Boston are actually have the controlling interest in the courts of England and Wales.
Yeah.
So the mafia owns the courts of England and Wales, and the biggest heroin traffickers in the world is Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip.
Yeah. Well,
and the British Royal Navy complains to me that all they do is transport the Queen's heroin.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that has ties, to the U.S. government as well, doing the poppy fields in Afghanistan, and some of our corrupt politicians doing the same thing. It's all connected.
Yeah, I know. And on that note, I smelled dinner.
Dinner's ready. I know it's late for you. So, Gregory, hey, I want to thank you for coming. I know you're going to come back on at another point in time. We wish you the best in getting your documentary done. And it was a pleasure to have you on His Glory TV. And anything you want to say to our 10 million plus before we...
The website is www.kingof.uk, and we're regularly reaching 15,000 views a day, and we're just in the process of getting a new server so we can handle a lot more. So if you can't get on the site, then try again, and we'll have better capacity in about a week to cope. Yeah.
Who knows? In a week, you may be in Buckingham Palace.
Exactly. Well, actually, the film crew's going. We've got to get this done real quick.
That's right. All right, Gregory, thank you so much for coming on. Cheers, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
All
Thank you.
right. Bye.
Bye.